Hello, my name is Dr. Michael Diston. I'm sitting here with Chris Malloy and Steve Fornato of TMFD Financial. We've been talking about getting a practice ready for sale, and one of the questions that I have is, what can the seller do to make their practice more attractive to a buyer?
That's right. Well, I think there's a couple of things that may be sort of hidden elements to getting a practice ready for sale. One of the key ones is the premises lease. I often say that that is the most important document in the practice because it's where the business is done. It's not like an accounting office, per se, where any commercial space will do. A dental office is very specific for the function of what's happening there. And you know, it's very expensive to set up a dental practice. These days, $750,000 is not out of the question.
Right.
It can be north of that too. So it's really important to be able to have stability in that location, which is why the lease is so important. And a lease can be a very complex document as well. Some of the key terms and elements that we look for is, one of the common ones is the assignment clause, which means that landlord is looking for approval, in a sense, for there to be a change in ownership.
Yes.
Now, most of the time, they will accept the change of ownership. I think they call it without undue delay. But the point is, you need to get permission. So it just adds one more step in the process.
Right.
Other clauses, perhaps one of the more devastating ones, I would say, is a demolition clause, where if the landlord gives notice, they may ask the practice to, they can't renew the lease. So that would be very detrimental, because although there's a lot of dental practices around, again, you want the right kind of location. You want storefront or something that's got high visibility, and that may not be readily available with such high density of practices in Southern Ontario. And I think one of the other key elements of a lease is the term renewal. Right? We're familiar with the fact that most terms are 5 years plus 5 years, and we can renew into the future. And that's so important because banks will lend according to the terms of the lease and the lease renewal. So what we're seeing in recent years is banks have extended their amortizations up to 10 years and more recently up to 12 years. So it's really ideal for the lease to have renewals that go at least 10 years beyond the sale date.
Exactly. What are some other aspects, Steve? I hear contracts comes up all the time.
Yeah, it's extremely important. It actually provides a lot more, I guess, value to a practice if there are contracts in place. And a lot of times what it does, it sort of stipulates not only just duties and responsibilities of the employees, but more importantly, it talks about severance clauses or termination clauses. Because without that in place, an employee that has a 20 or 30 year track record is entitled to quite a bit of severance in civil law standards. I mean, the Employment Standards Act generally caps the amount of severance that is to be paid. However, we've seen many cases that civil law will create a bigger liability. And without a contract in place, that could be a rather large number. And without knowing that in advance, a purchaser could be buying that severance ultimately. So if it isn't stipulated and you're figuring, okay, a 20-year employee might cost me another $50,000, $60,000, I have to factor that in if I'm going to look at paying a certain price.
So what might a dentist do then that doesn't have contracts for all his employees? And I know it's difficult sometimes to get long-term employees, your older employees, to convert to signed contracts. What would your suggestion be?
Yeah, introducing staff contracts can be tricky, especially in a mature practice. It would be worthwhile, if possible, to try to work on that. I know that employment lawyers can coach on providing guidance in that respect. A common example would be to give notice to a longstanding employee and say, 2 years from now, this is your job will be terminated, and that's in lieu of severance. But the reality is it wouldn't be received all that well. It can really hurt the morale in the practice to do that. In some cases, people will provide a financial incentive to a staff member to
heard
take
about
that
that.
on, either a one-time payment or an increase in pay, just to entice them to accept that. But at the end of the day, these staff contracts, if they're put in place, will help improve the value of the practice, because for the buyer, it provides more certainty.
Tax is an important feature in a sale of a practice. We live in a country where our tax rate is extremely high, so being able to keep the most after-tax dollars in your pocket is crucial.